So over the years, I've gotten tons of calls from people that have decided they want to live off the grid in Montana. Well, if that's something you're thinking about, there are many things to keep in mind and plan for if that's what you want to do. Unless you're planning on going full on Grizzly Adams and just living in a log cabin with no utilities, there's a lot of things that you got to think about with the infrastructure, and there's a lot of things that come into play with financing, finding a lot, all of that. And in this video, we're going to go over some of the main things you need to keep in mind and show you some of the ways people live off the grid here in Montana. Before we get to this week's episode, I would like to take a minute to thank all of you that have been watching our videos. I do have one favor to ask though. I was looking at our stats and it says that 68% of the people that watch our videos are not subscribed to our channel. So if you're one of those people, I would really appreciate it if you could subscribe. It would definitely help us out a ton. Thank you, and let's get on with this week's episode. So as I was talking about in the intro, over the past few years I've had tons of people call me wanting to live off the grid, and they'll send me properties that they saw online that, oh, this looks like the perfect spot. And what they don't remember, don't think about is, as you can see, I filmed this part of the video in last summer. And in these areas during the winter, they're not plowed. They're not maintained by the county or obviously by any city when you're off the grid. So a lot of times these properties will be miles and miles and miles of gravel road to get to your property that is not maintained. So if you're going to try and be there in the winter, you better have the whole setup to be able to plow yourself out, in and out, to get to your property, because many of the off-grid properties are not along a maintained road. They are way out, and they lead into what everybody thinks about off-grid, that they want to be way out and away from everybody. But when you have that, you're also dealing with a lot of things that you have to be self-sufficient, mainly the road. And a lot of these places too, even if you have the plows and everything, it's dang near impossible to get in and out of there with the amount of snow they get in some of these areas that are off-grid. And another thing to keep in mind, nowadays with the insurance situation, if you're more than 7 miles away from a fire department, which most of these off-grid properties are way more than 7 miles away, you're going to have a heck of a time getting insurance. And if you do, it's certainly not going to be cheap. And if you're thinking about buying just bare land and starting from scratch and getting a construction loan, I talked to a lender today who said you're probably going to have to put at least 50% up front in order for the banks to loan on a property like this. One other thing to look at when you're looking at these properties is a lot of them have easements through them with the Forest Service or fire roads or whatever it may be. So you're going to want to do your homework and make sure you know who has access to and from your property or across your property. And then you want to look at the property lines and make sure you know who you're bordering and if that's going to affect the way you want to build or whatever you have in mind in the future. So the biggest thing I see with people that want to be off-grid and they want to start from scratch is they don't understand how much is needed for all of the infrastructure. If you're trying to live like you do in town, which a lot of people are, there are a ton of things you have to put into the house, and none of it is cheap, and mainly because of where you are. Some of these contractors that come out to drill a well or to put in whatever, they're driving an hour out of town, so that just tax on extra money to the final cost. So I toured an off-grid house a while back. Let's take a look at some of their infrastructure, and then I'll get online and show you the cost of what I found for the solar and electrical setup. So in this particular house, they had pretty much everything. This is the backup gas furnace that they had down in the basement, and the gas is propane, and we'll see these later. They have huge propane tanks outside. This place also had a big wood-burning stove that's vented all the way through the house. It has this gas hot water heater. And then in the other room, here's all the batteries. These are marine batteries, but this is what powers the entire house. The solar panels outside will replenish these, But one thing you need to keep in mind in the winter here in Montana is we don't get tons of sunny days. So when you're running a vacuum or any big appliance during the middle of winter, it's going to draw down these batteries quite a bit. And then you're going to have to start using the generator that I'll show you a little bit later as well. This is the well pump, and here's all your controls for the converter from the solar panels into the batteries. And just as you can see, tons of infrastructure. Here's the big propane tanks that I was talking about. These are, I think these are 2,000-gallon tanks, and this little device in the middle of them sends a signal back to the propane company when they're starting to run low, so they can just come right out and refill them when they get too low. So that's kind of, again, you're off grid, but you're using all of the benefits of technology. And here's the generator that I was talking about. This is run on diesel, so that's another thing. You got to keep diesel on hand to keep this thing ready to go in case your batteries die or the solar isn't keeping up. You run this to charge your batteries to give yourself some power in the house. So as you can see, there's a ton of things that go into living off grid, and I didn't even talk about drilling a well, which is probably going to be your biggest cost depending on where you are. So let's go online here and check out some of the costs for just the solar and power. So I just got online and looked up off-grid solar, and this is what popped up. There's obviously many other options you can get, and it's clearly going to depend on the size of the house and how much power you need, but what they're giving you here is over $16,000. So I just wanted to show you that the cost of this can be a ton, and if you add, these extra things, it's up to $18,000. So depending on the size of the house and what you're trying to do, you're definitely going to need to do your homework on this. And like I said, I am no expert, but I know enough to realize that it's not cheap to live off grid, and it's not cheap to put all these things into your house. So the moral of the story is, if you're looking to live off grid, I would look at houses that already exist, that are already set up. I think it may end up being a lot cheaper than trying to do everything yourself.
Thank you for watching our video. Please call, text, or email for more information. And don't forget to watch our other videos about Montana.